Every year, the events of Karbala are remembered and commemorated all over the world wherever Shia Muslims gather. Every year. Why does it have to be every year? If it were merely a question of history, if it were merely going through and accumulating the historical facts, who said what and when, then it would be simple. Once it was done once, it need not be repeated. If it was simply a question of personalities, of biography, once one had accumulated all the data and information, it need not be repeated. If it was simply a question of geography, once one had traced the route on the map, once one had planned out the site of Karbala itself, perhaps once one had accumulated pictures of the site or even a site visit, then there would be no need to remember or to repeat it. There is something profoundly more important happening here than just geography, personalities, and history. In order to understand the importance of the events of Karbala and remembering them, we need to try to see it from God's perspective. Now, in our human perspective, we will see that this is so many years ago, it takes so long, and people go from place to place. That's because we human beings are stuck in time. We measure our existence by days and weeks and years. We have a past. Hopefully, we also have a future. But this is not the way that things are from God's perspective. Because we say of God that God is eternal. Eternal means beyond time. There is no time with God. God is not old or young. God is beyond time. There is no past with God. There is no future with God. There is only the present. So the events of Karbala are present right at this moment from God's perspective. The events have never come to an end because there is no end, there is no time. And so by remembering, we are entering into God's perspective, entering into that eternal now of God, the eternal present. And in that way, we are making those events present today in a spiritual way. In the same way, the events of Karbala go way beyond geography and place, because God is not confined by space. God is not here or here or here. There is nowhere that God is, and there is nowhere that God is not, because God is the creator of where. God is the creator of space. God is beyond space. That means that the events of Karbala in our earthly understanding happened in that place. But in God's understanding, the events of Karbala happen in every place, because there is no place with God. God is not bound by space. So when we enter into God's perspective, we are not bound by time, we are not bound by space. We are actually entering into something beyond history, beyond geography. We call this meta-history. We call this meta-geography, beyond. And in this way, we can draw much closer to the events of Karbala once we remove from them the constraints of history and geography, because we are entering into a spiritual proximity, just as we enter into a spiritual proximity with God. This is the meaning of the phrase that one often hears repeated at this time, that every place is Karbala, every day is Ashura. This means that the spirit of Karbala, the commitment and dedication to the way of God, is present now here in every aspect of life. There are no barriers with God. This then has a profound impact on those who remember, those who make present once again the events of Karbala in every aspect of their lives. It means that all tyranny must be opposed. It means that injustice must always be opposed, so that one gives oneself totally to promoting justice and the godly way of life for which Imam Hussain and his companions died. So it is that this place, this time, this context, my life, my society, must, as it were, become the field of Karbala. And that struggle must continue in all these dimensions, in a never-ending way, repeated not just every year, repeated every minute, every fiber of everything that we do, so that every place is Karbala and every day is Ashura. But there is an inner dimension here which is profoundly important. The inner dimension of the struggle within. Because every human being has those tendencies, the tendencies of rebellion against the way of God, the tendencies in some small way to be like Yazid. We can speak of these of the Yazidi tendencies or elements within our own lives, a Yazidi character. This, of course, then must be rooted out and must be opposed. So we must re-examine ourselves to see how we are opposing our Yazidi character and replacing it instead with the elements of the character of Imam Hussain and of his companions, so that we are being transformed within ourselves as well as within the society in which we live through the meaning and the spirit of Karbala. We are making Hussain present in our character, in our lives, in such a way that we take on that struggle, which was his struggle and that of his companions and that of the survivors of Karbala, who show us the way of remembrance after his death. To go to Karbala is to reinforce that spirit. Some people are fortunate enough to go once or more times in their lives. But if we cannot physically go to Karbala itself, spiritually we can go there through the commemoration, more than just retelling the stories, more than just rehearsing the acts, but spiritually allowing ourselves to enter into that space and that time. In the same way that Lady Zainab led the survivors from Karbala to go to Karbala on their way back to Medina, so also she sets the pattern for the 40th day commemoration for the day of Arba'in itself. And on this day, we see something of the profound universal nature of the human race and therefore of Islam, because we see millions of people from all parts of the world, Shia Muslims, Sunni Muslims, those who are not Muslims at all. We see Christians and Jews and people of other faiths. We see people of no faith who are attracted to go to Karbala at this time, a demonstration of the unity of humankind, a reminder to us that Imam Hussain, like all those who are drawn into that closest embrace with God, do not belong to the Muslim community alone, do not belong to the Shia, but rather belong to God and therefore belong to all humankind. So our vision here is being expanded. Our lens is opening out. We have moved from a particular time and place. We have taken that spirit into our own lives. We have taken that spirit into our own society. But now we are asked to take that onto a worldwide canvas. And that means that for those who love and cherish Imam Hussain and his memory, and who love and revere and respect the martyrdom of the field of Karbala, these are the ones who need to become the messengers. These are the ones who need to take that message out to all the peoples of the earth, to show the deeper spiritual meaning behind the sacrifice of Imam Hussain. That is the sacrifice to come onto a godly path that respects all human beings in their dignity, that is moved by the compassion, by the mercy that Imam Hussain showed on this occasion, that is moved to try at all costs, if at all possible, to avoid bloodshed and the loss of human life, to regard every life as being sacred, and to promote justice wherever it may be in the world. So this is the final importance, the memory, to make present here, now, throughout the world, those higher values of justice, of equality, of the opposition to all that would drag people away from God, that would drag people into tyranny, that would drag people into inhumanity, treating others as though they were subhuman, as though their lives in some way do not matter equally in the sight of God to every other human life. That justice promotes godliness within the human being, and that godliness makes us transform the society in which we live. So from a Shia perspective, the events of Karbala profoundly reinforce those twin tracks that will take the train of humanity toward the gates of paradise, in which the values of paradise are to be incorporated into this world, so that when Imam al-Mahdi returns, he will find the tracks in place and he will find the train moving forwards.